A single dad danced with his terrified boss and she whispered, "Please don't leave me." No one at the gala understood what they were looking at. Not at first. Because nothing about it made sense. The most feared woman in the company, the one employees described in hushed tones as unbreakable, stood in the dim edge of the rooftop, her body trembling ever so slightly, in the arms of a man no one had ever noticed before. A janitor. A single father. Still in his worn work uniform. And she was holding on to him like he was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Then, almost inaudibly, her voice broke the silence between them. "Please, don't leave me." The music kept playing. Glasses clinked. Executives laughed under golden lights. But something irreversible had already begun. Ethan Cole had spent most of his life becoming invisible. It wasn't something he chose. It was something the world quietly decided for him. At 34, he worked as part of the night maintenance crew in one of the most prestigious corporate towers in the city. A place where billion-dollar deals were signed, careers were made, and reputations were destroyed with a single decision. To people upstairs, he wasn't Ethan. He was just maintenance. Someone who fixed what broke. Someone who didn't belong in conversations. Someone who existed, but didn't matter. And he was used to that. Because life had taught him early that survival sometimes meant accepting the roles people gave you, even if they were smaller than who you really were. But there was one role Ethan never took lightly. Being a father. Every morning after finishing his shift, he would stop by a small apartment on the edge of the city, where his 6-year-old daughter Lily waited for him. She had big, curious eyes and a habit of asking questions that made the world feel bigger than it was. "Dad," she once asked, "why don't you work in a big office like the people you clean for?" Ethan had smiled, brushing her hair gently. "Because someone has to make sure those offices don't fall apart." She had frowned. "But you could do more." He didn't answer. Because children sometimes see truths adults spend years avoiding. What no one in that building knew was that Ethan hadn't always been a janitor. Years ago, he had been one of the top students in structural engineering at a respected university. Brilliant, driven, full of ideas that could reshape entire cities. But life doesn't always reward potential. Sometimes it tests it. When his wife fell ill, everything changed. Medical bills piled up. Time disappeared. Dreams were replaced with survival. And when she passed away, Ethan was left with a choice. Chase ambition, or raise his daughter. He chose Lily. Every single time. So he took the job that paid immediately. The job that didn't ask questions. The job that didn't care who he used to be. And slowly the world forgot. But Ethan didn't forget. He still carried a small worn notebook in his bag. Inside it were sketches. Buildings. Community centers. Affordable housing designs. Spaces meant for people who were never invited to rooftops like this one. He never showed them to anyone. Because some dreams feel safer when they're hidden. On the other side of that same building, living a completely different life, was Claire Donovan. Geo. Powerful. Untouchable. At least that's what everyone believed. Claire had built her reputation on control. Every word measured. Every move calculated. Every emotion buried. She had climbed her way to the top of a system that wasn't designed for her to win. And she had done it without ever letting anyone see her struggle. Because in her world, weakness wasn't forgiven. It was exploited. People admired her, feared her, respected her. But no one really knew her. And then there was Daniel Hayes. A man whose name alone could shift the mood in any room. Investor. Board member. And the one person from Claire's past she had spent years trying to forget. The night of the gala was supposed to be perfect. A celebration of success. A display of power. A reminder to everyone watching that Claire Donovan was in control. Ethan wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. He had been assigned to stay on standby in case anything malfunctioned. Lights, sound system, anything that could disrupt the illusion of perfection. So he stood near the service entrance. Watching. Observing. Existing quietly at the edge of a world he wasn't part of. That's when he saw her. Claire. Moving through the crowd like she always did. Confident. Precise. Untouchable. Until she wasn't. Daniel stepped in front of her. And everything changed. From a distance, it looked like a normal conversation. Two powerful people exchanging words. But Ethan noticed something others didn't. The way Claire's posture shifted. The way her shoulders tightened. The way her face lost color, not dramatically but enough to matter. He had seen that look before. Not in boardrooms. But in hospital rooms. In moments when people were holding themselves together with everything they had, just to avoid breaking in front of others. Claire excused herself quickly. Too quickly. and walked toward the far edge of the rooftop, away from the lights, away from the noise, away from him. Ethan didn't follow immediately. He waited, because sometimes the difference between helping and intruding is timing. 1 minute passed, then 2. She didn't come back, so he moved. The corner of the rooftop was darker, quieter. Real. Claire stood at the railing, gripping it tightly, her breathing controlled, but barely, like someone trying to stay afloat in deep water. She heard him approach, turned, ready to dismiss whoever it was. But then she saw him. Not an executive, not a board member, not someone who wanted something from her. Just them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan did something no one in that building had ever done before. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer advice. He didn't pretend to understand. He simply extended his hand. Come, steady, without expectation. One dance, he said quietly. Right here. Claire stared at his hand, confused, guarded, exhausted. Behind her, the party continued. Daniel was still there. The pressure, the expectations, the weight of everything she had built and everything she could lose. And in front of her was something simple, something human, something real. She took his hand. At first, her movements were stiff, controlled, like someone who had forgotten how to let go. Ethan adjusted without saying a word, slowed his pace, guided gently, not leading, not forcing, just allowing space. There was no music in their corner, only distant echoes. But somehow, it didn't matter, because for the first time that night, Claire wasn't performing. She was just there. Seconds passed, then a minute, and then something shifted. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Her grip softened. Her breathing slowed. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. You work here, she said quietly. Yes. Do you know who I am? Ethan nodded. Does it matter? He asked. Claire paused. For the first time in years, she didn't have an immediate answer. I don't know, she admitted. And that was the moment something inside her began to crack. Not break, not collapse, but open. Slowly, carefully, like a door she had kept locked for too long. She leaned forward, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. Ethan didn't move, didn't react, didn't make it bigger than it was. He simply stayed, because sometimes, that's all someone needs. And then, in a voice so soft it barely existed, she whispered, Please, don't leave me. Ethan understood. It wasn't about the dance. It wasn't about the moment. It was about everything she had been holding in for far too long. I'm right here, he said. And for the first time that night, Claire believed it. But what neither of them realized was that across the rooftop, someone was watching. And this moment, this simple, quiet act of kindness, was about to change everything. It started with a glance, then a pause, then silence spreading through a crowd that had been laughing just seconds before. People began to notice. At first only a few, then more, then everyone, because something about the scene didn't belong. Not in that world, not at that event, not in that carefully constructed image of power and perfection. Claire Donovan, the woman who controlled billion-dollar decisions without hesitation, was standing in the shadows, holding onto a man in a maintenance uniform, like she needed him. Whispers began. Oh, sure. Curious. Who is that? Is that staff? What is she doing? And then came the one voice that cut through all of it. Cold, controlled, familiar. Daniel Hayes. Well, he said, stepping forward with a slow, deliberate smile, this is unexpected. The air changed instantly. Claire froze. Not visibly. Not enough for most people to notice. But Ethan felt it. The tension returning. Like a storm that had only paused, not passed. Daniel approached them with the confidence of a man who had never been told no in a way that mattered. His eyes moved from Claire to Ethan and back again. Judging. Calculating. Dismissing. You've always had surprising taste, Claire, he continued, his voice smooth but edged with something darker. Claire straightened slightly. The CEO returning. The armor rebuilding. This isn't your concern, Daniel. But he didn't step back. He stepped closer. It becomes my concern, he said quietly, when the face of this company starts making questionable decisions. In public. The word public lingered. Heavy. Intentional. Around them people pretended not to stare. But they were watching. Every movement. Every word. Ethan could feel it. The shift. The weight of judgment pressing down. Not on Claire. On him. To them he wasn't a person. He was a mistake. An embarrassment. Something out of place. Daniel turned his full attention to Ethan now, his smile tightening. And you are. Ethan didn't rush his answer. Didn't shrink. Didn't over-explain. Ethan, he said simply. Daniel let out a quiet laugh. Ethan, he repeated as if the name itself was amusing. And what exactly do you do here, Ethan? Before Ethan could answer, someone from the crowd spoke. Too loudly. Too casually. He's maintenance. The word landed like a verdict. Daniel nodded slowly. Of course you are. He stepped even closer now. Close enough that the difference between them became undeniable. The tailored suit. The polished shoes. The effortless authority. Versus worn fabric. Work boots. Quiet presence. You must be very proud, Daniel said, his tone dripping with false politeness, to find yourself here. Ethan met his gaze. Calm. Unshaken. I'm just doing my job. Daniel smiled again. But this time there was no warmth in it. Yes, he said. That's exactly what you should be doing. The implication was clear. Know your place. Claire stepped forward. Her voice sharper now. That's enough. Daniel turned back to her. Is it? He asked softly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've forgotten yours. A ripple moved through the crowd. Claire's jaw tightened. I haven't forgotten anything. Daniel tilted his head slightly, studying her. No, he said slowly. You've just gotten emotional. The word hit harder than anything else he'd said. Because in her world, that was the worst accusation of all. Ethan felt her hand tighten slightly in his. And in that moment, he understood something. This wasn't just about power, or status, or appearances. This was personal. Very personal. Claire, Daniel continued, lowering his voice just enough to sound intimate, you've worked too hard to let something like this ruin your image. Something like this. Ethan. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others leaned in, waiting, because this was the moment. The moment where people showed who they really were. Would she let go? Claire didn't move. Daniel noticed, and his smile faded. Don't tell me, he said quietly, you actually think this matters? Claire looked at Ethan, just for a second. And in that second, everything slowed, because for the first time in years, she wasn't calculating. She wasn't performing. She wasn't choosing based on power. She was choosing based on truth. And the truth was simple. This man had done more for her in 5 minutes than anyone in that room had done in years. She turned back to Daniel. This matters, she said. The silence that followed was absolute. Daniel blinked once, then smiled again. But now, there was something dangerous behind it. You're making a mistake. Claire didn't respond. So he stepped closer. Close enough that only she could hear the next words. You think he sees you? Daniel whispered. He doesn't. He sees an opportunity. Claire's expression didn't change. But Ethan heard it. Every word. And for the first time, something inside him shifted. Not anger. Not fear. Something deeper. Because he had spent years being invisible. Years being underestimated. Years being reduced to something smaller than he was. And he had accepted it. For himself. But not for this. Not for someone who was clearly fighting something far heavier than anyone understood. Ethan stepped slightly forward. Just enough to break the line between them. Sir, he said calmly. Daniel looked at him. Annoyed. This isn't your conversation. Ethan didn't raise his voice. Didn't challenge him aggressively. But he didn't step back either. It doesn't have to be, he said. But you're making it one. A few people in the crowd shifted again. Surprised. Because that wasn't how this was supposed to go. People like Ethan didn't speak like that. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. You're very confident, he said. For someone in your position. Ethan held his gaze. Respect isn't a position. The words landed quietly, but heavily, and for the first time, Daniel didn't have an immediate response. Claire felt it. The shift. Not in the room, but in the balance. Because for once, someone wasn't afraid of him. And it wasn't another executive. It was the man everyone had already dismissed. Daniel exhaled slowly, then smiled again. Well, he said, stepping back slightly, this has been entertaining. He looked around the crowd. But let's not forget where we are. His eyes returned to Claire. You have a company to run. And then to Ethan. And you. Pause. Have floors to clean. The words echoed. Sure. Intentional. And then he turned. Walking back toward the center of the party. as if the moment had already ended. But it hadn't, because something had changed. Not just for Claire. For everyone watching. Claire looked at Ethan. Really looked at him. And for the first time, she saw more than a uniform. "Why didn't you walk away?" she asked quietly. Ethan shrugged slightly. "Because you didn't." The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else that night. Claire let out a slow breath. "You don't even know what you just stepped into." Ethan gave a small, almost tired smile. "I think I do." Pause. "And I think you've been standing in it alone for a long time." Claire didn't respond. Because she couldn't. Not without breaking something she had spent years holding together. But her grip on his hand didn't loosen. And across the room, Daniel watched. This time, not with amusement, but with intent. Because men like him didn't lose control of situations. They corrected them. And whatever this was, whatever had just started, he was going to end it. Daniel didn't return to the center of the party. Not really. He stood there, smiling, talking, shaking hands. But his attention was somewhere else, locked on them, on Claire, on Ethan, and on the quiet shift that had just happened in front of everyone. Because Daniel Hayes wasn't a man who ignored threats. Even small ones. Especially small ones. They were the kind people underestimated. The kind that grew, if left alone. And Ethan Cole was starting to look like one of those. Across the rooftop, Claire finally let go of Ethan's hand. But she didn't step away. Not fully. The moment lingered between them. Fragile. Real. "You should go," she said quietly. Ethan shook his head. "Do you want me to?" Claire hesitated. Because the answer was no. But the world she lived in didn't allow for simple answers. "This isn't just about tonight," she said. "People saw this." "I know. It will have consequences." Ethan nodded. "Everything does." Claire studied him. Trying to understand. Trying to place him. Trying to figure out why he wasn't reacting the way everyone else would. "You're not worried?" she asked. Ethan gave a small shrug. "I've already lost everything that matters once," he said. "The rest doesn't scare me as much." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't said for effect. They were just true. And somehow that made them heavier. Claire looked away. Out at the city. "I don't get to lose," she said quietly. Ethan followed her gaze. "Then maybe that's why you're so tired." She froze. Because no one had ever said that to her before. Not like that. Not without judgment. Not without expectation. Just observation. And before she could respond, "Claire." Her name. Sure. Official. She turned. 3 members of the board were approaching. Older. Controlled. Careful. But their expressions were not. "We need a word," one of them said. Claire straightened instantly. The CEO returned. "Of course." She glanced at Ethan. Just for a moment. "Stay," she said quietly. Then she walked toward them. Ethan remained where he was. Not because he was told to, but because something told him. She wasn't ready to stand alone again. The board didn't waste time. "What exactly is going on?" one of them asked, voice low but firm. Claire didn't flinch. "I was taking a moment." "With staff?" another added, clearly unimpressed. Claire's eyes hardened slightly. "With a person," she corrected. The distinction didn't help. "This is not appropriate," the first man said. "Not tonight. Not here." Claire remained calm. "I'm aware of how it looks." "Are you?" another asked. "Because from where we're standing, it looks like a lapse in judgment." There was again. Judgment. Not of the situation. Of her. Claire inhaled slowly. "I'm handling it." The board exchanged glances. "No," one of them said. "You're not." Silence. And then. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that raises concerns." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly. "What concerns?" The answer came without hesitation. "Control." The word landed harder than Daniel's. Because this one was official, measured, dangerous. "You've built this company on discipline," another board member continued. "Precision. Consistency. And tonight," the first added, "you're distracted." Claire felt it. Not fear, but pressure. The kind that doesn't come from a single moment, but from everything attached to it. Years of work, sacrifices, decisions, all balancing on perception. "We will discuss this further," one of them said. "Privately." Claire nodded once. "Understood." They stepped back, returning to the crowd. But the message remained. Clear, loud, dangerous. Claire stood there for a moment. Still. Then she turned back. Ethan was still there. Exactly where she left him. And for some reason, that mattered more than anything that had just been said. "They're not wrong," she said quietly as she approached. Ethan didn't respond immediately. "They're just not right either," he said after a moment. Claire almost smiled. "Almost. You make things sound simple." Ethan shook his head. "They're not simple." Pause. "But they're clear." Claire looked at him. "And what's clear to you?" Ethan met her gaze. "That you needed help." Another pause. "And that everyone else was too busy judging to offer it." The words settled between them. And before Claire could respond, "Dad." The voice came from behind. Small. Soft. Ethan turned instantly. Lily stood near the service entrance, holding a small backpack, looking slightly nervous. Claire blinked. "You brought your daughter here?" she asked, surprised. Ethan stepped toward Lily, kneeling slightly. "You were supposed to stay with Mrs. Khan," he said gently. Lily nodded. "I did," she said. "But she said you forgot your notebook." She held it up. The worn sketchbook. Ethan took it. "Thank you," he said softly. Lily looked around, taking in the lights, the people, the atmosphere. Then her eyes landed on Claire. "Hi," she said. Claire hesitated. Then, "Hi." Something in her voice softened. "This is my boss," Ethan said gently. Lily's eyes widened slightly. "You're the boss of the whole building?" she asked. Claire nodded. "I guess I am." Lily thought about that, then smiled. "My dad fixes everything in your building," she said proudly. Claire looked at Ethan, and for the first time, she didn't see a uniform. She saw something else, something stronger. "He does," she said quietly. Lily beamed. "I told him he could do more," she added. Ethan sighed softly. "Lily?" But Claire raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "What do you mean?" she asked. Lily shrugged. "He draws buildings all the time," she said. "Big ones. Beautiful ones." Claire's attention sharpened. She looked at the notebook in Ethan's hand. "You draw." Ethan hesitated. "It's nothing." Lily frowned. "It's not nothing." Claire held out her hand. "May I?" Ethan paused, then slowly handed it over. Claire opened the notebook, and everything changed, because what she saw wasn't amateur. It wasn't casual. It was brilliant, detailed, purposeful, human. Buildings designed for people, not profit, not prestige. People. Claire turned another page, then another, each one better than the last. Her expression shifted, from curiosity, to surprise, to something deeper. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked quietly. Ethan shrugged. "A long time." "And no one's seen this?" "No." Claire closed the notebook slowly, and looked at him. Really looked at him. "You've been hiding this." Ethan didn't deny it. "Some things are easier to keep to yourself." Claire shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "Some things are too important to hide." Across the room, Daniel was still watching. And now, he wasn't just watching a moment. He was watching a shift. One he didn't understand yet, but one he intended to stop. Because what Claire had just discovered wasn't just talent. It was potential. And potential was dangerous. Especially when it came from someone the world had already dismissed. The moment Claire closed the notebook, the world around her felt different. Not louder. Not quieter. Clear. Because for the first time that night, she wasn't reacting. She was seeing. Really seeing. Ethan stood in front of her. Same uniform, same quiet posture, same presence everyone had ignored. But now, he was impossible to overlook. "You designed all of this?" Claire asked, her voice low but steady. Ethan nodded slightly. "They're just ideas." Claire shook her head. "No," she said. "They're solutions." That single word carried weight. Because Claire Donovan didn't compliment lightly. She evaluated. She measured. She decided. And right now, she was deciding. Lily looked between them, confused but curious. "Is it good?" she asked. Claire looked down at her. And for the first time that evening, a real smile appeared. "It's more than good," she said softly. "It's important." Lily beamed. "I told you," she said, looking at Ethan. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Because something he had buried for years was suddenly standing in the open. And he wasn't sure what to do with that. Claire turned another page in her mind. Not the notebook. Her life. Her decisions. Her patterns. All the years of choosing control over connection. Power over vulnerability. Precision over possibility. And yet, The most real moment she had experienced in years had come from a man she wasn't supposed to notice. "Why didn't you ever try to pursue this?" she asked. Ethan looked at Lily, then back at Claire. "Because life doesn't always wait for the right timing," he said. Claire held his gaze. "No," she said quietly. "But it also doesn't stop giving chances." Before Ethan could respond, "Claire." Daniel's voice again. Closer this time. Sharper. The temperature dropped instantly. Claire didn't turn immediately. "I thought we were done," she said. Daniel stepped forward anyway. His patience gone. His control thinning. "You're not seriously entertaining this?" he said, gesturing toward the notebook. Claire turned slowly. "I'm not entertaining anything," she replied. "I'm recognizing it." Daniel let out a short laugh. "Recognizing what?" he asked. "A hobby?" The word was deliberate. Dismissive. Claire didn't flinch. "Talent." Daniel's expression hardened. "You're letting one emotional moment distort your judgment," he said. "No," Claire replied calmly. "I'm correcting it." That was the moment everything shifted. Because Daniel wasn't used to resistance. Not from her. "You're forgetting who you are," he said quietly. Claire stepped forward. "No," she said. "I'm remembering." Silence. The crowd had stopped pretending not to watch. Because this was no longer subtle. Daniel's voice dropped. "Dangerous now. You built your position on discipline," he said. "On logic. On control." His eyes flicked toward Ethan. "And now you're risking it, for him?" Claire followed his gaze. And something inside her settled. Not doubt. Not fear. Clarity. "I'm not risking anything," she said. "I'm choosing." The word hit harder than anything before. Because it wasn't defensive. It was final. Daniel exhaled slowly. Then smiled again. But this time, it didn't reach his eyes. "You think this ends well?" he asked. Claire didn't answer. Because she already knew something he didn't. This wasn't about winning. It was about truth. And truth didn't need approval. Daniel stepped closer one last time. "Then let me be clear," he said quietly. "If you move forward with this, I will make sure the board sees exactly what you've become." Claire didn't react. But Lily did. She stepped slightly closer to Ethan, gripping his hand. Daniel noticed. And for a brief second, something flickered across his face. Not empathy. Recognition. Because for the first time, he realized something. This wasn't just a moment. This was a shift he couldn't easily control. He straightened. Adjusted his suit. "Enjoy your evening," he said. And then he walked away. But this time, he wasn't watching. He was planning. The rooftop felt different now. Quieter. Heavier. More real. Claire looked at Ethan. Then at Lily. "Do you trust me?" she asked suddenly. Ethan frowned slightly. "That depends," he said. "On what you're asking." Claire nodded. "Fair." Pause. Then. "I want you to come in tomorrow." Ethan blinked. "For what?" Claire held up the notebook. "For this." Ethan hesitated. "This isn't my world," he said. Claire stepped closer. "It could be." Lily looked up at him. "Dad?" she whispered. Ethan looked down at her. And in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. Not for survival. For more. He exhaled slowly. "I don't want special treatment," he said. Claire shook her head. "You won't get it," she replied. "You'll get an opportunity." Another pause. "And what you do with it is up to you." Ethan studied her. Trying to decide. Trying to understand if this was real. Or just another moment that would disappear by morning. But something about her felt different. Not powerful. Not distant. Honest. "Okay," he said finally. Claire nodded once. "Good." And for the first time that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not control. Not pressure. Purpose. Across the city. In a quiet office lit only by a desk lamp, Daniel Hayes sat alone. A file open in front of him. Ethan Cole. Maintenance staff. Single father. No corporate history. No connections. No influence. Daniel leaned back slowly. "A mistake," he murmured. But something about it didn't sit right. Because he had seen the way Claire looked at him. And that wasn't a mistake. It was a threat. And Daniel didn't tolerate threats. He picked up his phone. "Get me everything on him," he said calmly. Pause. "And prepare the board." His expression darkened. "If she wants to play this game." A slow smile formed. "We'll finish it." Back on the rooftop, Ethan picked up Lily. "You ready to go home?" he asked softly. She nodded. But Dad, she said quietly. Yeah. You're not going to stay invisible anymore, right? Ethan paused, looked back once, at the lights, at the people, at the world he had never belonged to, and then at Claire, still standing there, watching, waiting. He smiled slightly. No, he said, and for the first time in years, he meant it, because what started as a simple dance was about to become something much bigger, something that would challenge power, expose truth, and change every life it touched. Morning didn't wait. It never did. But for Ethan, it felt different. For the first time in years, he didn't wake up thinking about what needed fixing. He woke up thinking about what could be built. Lily was already dressed, sitting at the small kitchen table, swinging her legs. You're nervous, she said without looking up. Ethan smiled slightly. Am I that obvious? She nodded. You always clean the same spot twice when you're nervous. Ethan looked down at the counter he had just wiped again. Okay, maybe a little. Lily stood up, walked over, and hugged him. You're going to do great, she said. Ethan closed his eyes for a second, because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the strongest belief. The building looked the same. Tall, impressive, unreachable. But as Ethan walked in that morning, it didn't feel the same. People noticed him. Not everyone, but enough. Whispers had traveled overnight. That's him? The guy from last night? Claire's, what exactly? Ethan ignored it, because attention was just another kind of noise, and he had learned how to move through noise a long time ago. Claire was already waiting. Not in her office. In a conference room. Glass walls. Open space. No barriers. Different. She didn't waste time. Show me, she said. Ethan placed the notebook on the table, opened it, and for the first time, he didn't hesitate. He explained. Each design. Each idea. Each purpose. Affordable housing that didn't feel temporary. Community spaces that felt permanent. Structures built not just to stand, but to serve. Claire listened. Not like a CEO. Like someone learning. And as he spoke, the room changed. Because this wasn't maintenance staff talking. This was a builder. A thinker. A creator. And for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't invisible. But they weren't alone. The door opened. The board walked in. One by one. Silent. Serious. And behind them, Daniel. Of course. Claire didn't turn. Good, she said calmly. You're all here. Ethan stepped back slightly. But Claire didn't let the moment shrink. I want you to see this, she said. She gestured toward the notebook. One of the board members picked it up. Flipped through it. Another leaned in. Then another. Silence. The kind that meant something. Daniel watched carefully. Waiting. Because he already knew what came next. Or at least, he thought he did. This is impressive, one board member admitted. But, there it was. But. Claire nodded. Go ahead. The man closed the notebook. This doesn't change the reality of the situation, he said. And what reality is that? Claire asked. He didn't hesitate. Perception. Another board member stepped in. You've blurred a line, she said, between leadership and personal involvement. Daniel finally spoke. And now you're doubling down, he added. Claire met his gaze. No, she said. I'm building something better. Daniel smiled slightly. With him, he asked. Claire didn't look away. Yes. The room shifted again. Because now, it wasn't subtle. It was a decision. You're risking your position, Daniel said. Claire stepped forward. No, she replied. I'm redefining it. Pause. Then she turned to the board. You want control, she said. You want results? She gestured toward Ethan. Then stop looking at titles, and start looking at value. Silence. Because deep down, they couldn't deny it. The work spoke for itself. And then, may I say something? It was Ethan. The room turned toward him. Some surprised. Some skeptical. Some dismissive. But this time, he didn't shrink. I didn't come here for a position, he said calmly. I didn't come here for recognition. Pause. I came because she asked me to show the truth. He looked around the room. And the truth is simple. Another pause. You don't lose anything by giving someone a chance. Silence. But you lose everything, he continued, when you ignore what's right, just because it doesn't look familiar. The words settled. Not loud. Not aggressive. But undeniable. Claire watched him. And in that moment, she knew. This wasn't just about talent. This was about character. And that was something no board could manufacture. The decision didn't come instantly. It never does. But something had shifted. Because for the first time, the conversation wasn't about perception. It was about purpose. Weeks passed, and everything changed. Ethan didn't become an executive overnight. That wasn't the story. He started small, consulting, reviewing, contributing. But every idea he touched made an impact. Projects shifted. Designs evolved. Communities became part of the conversation. And slowly, the company changed. Not dramatically, but meaningfully. Claire changed too. Not weaker. Not softer. Stronger. Because she no longer led from fear. She led from truth. And Daniel? He tried. He pushed. He questioned. He resisted. But influence without truth doesn't last. And eventually, even he had to step back. Because this wasn't a moment anymore. It was a direction. One evening months later, the rooftop was quiet again. No gala. No crowd. Just the city lights. Claire stood at the railing. Ethan walked up beside her. "You stayed," she said. Ethan smiled slightly. "You asked me to." Claire looked at him. "Do you regret it?" Ethan shook his head. "No." Pause. "Do you?" Claire looked out at the city, then back at him. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. "No." And somewhere in the background, Lily's voice echoed in memory. "You're not going to stay invisible anymore, right?" Ethan looked at the skyline, at everything that once felt out of reach, and now didn't. Because respect isn't given by position. It's earned by truth. And sometimes, all it takes to change everything is one moment, one choice, one person who refuses to walk away.